Good day and welcome to the Sentimental novel and Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Let's start first with taking a look at the literary side in the 1850s, because fiction was now becoming normalized as a reading material of choice. Before this time period, before we get heavily into the American Romantics movement, you would see a lot of age of reason writing, a lot of journals, a lot of diaries, a lot of argumentative essays, a lot of pamphlets, things that were very nonfiction. But by the time we get to 1852 and this novel is published, fiction is the reading material of choice. In fact, there's a spectacular boom of sentimental fiction. This was fiction written largely by women, about women, and for women. Now, the chief formula in the 1850s for American sentimental fiction would be to write about home and write about Jesus, or at the very least, a religious sentiment. Because it's sentimental fiction, you're going to find it to be overly emotional. There will be absolutely unbelievable coincidences, very clean, tidy endings, marriage plots that end happily, and an inconceivable number of tears. It is going to be an emotional roller coaster ride throughout. Because this is written about women and for women, you're going to have very saintly heroines. They're going to overcome their trials and their tribulations with the help of religion. Or if it's not overtly religious, their ultimate goals are going to be very much in morality. They're looking to become married. They're looking to be the best they can in motherhood. In fact, we have a critic saying that this type of fiction was, quote, pious to a repulsive degree. So let's start with our author, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Her birth and death dates are 1811 to 1896. She was a daughter of a famous minister, sister of 6 ministers, and wife of a minister and a college religion professor. Again, as we said in the previous statements, that you have this over-sentimentality that would bring in the idea of home and Jesus, and she definitely has that in her background, especially when she is the mother of 6 young children by the time she writes Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1851. She also had a bit of a motivation to write. In the 1850s, we see the Fugitive Slave Law coming into being in America. This is part of the Compromise of 1850. Would territories now be admitted to the United States as a free state or as a slave state? And at this point, if slave state was going to come in as a full free state, as a full state, you would need a free state to come in as well. So this made all people in all states party to a de facto support of slavery. Either you supported free states without slavery, or you supported slave states where they could have slaves. Now, if you did not support slavery and you decided to actually help slaves free themselves, if you gave food, shelter, or assistance to a fugitive slave, you could get a $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. And a $1,000 fine was a lot of money. It'd be about $21,000 plus in today's money. Now, when we start looking at the composition history, Uncle Tom's Cabin actually was not published as a book. It started in the newspapers as a serialized novel. You can see it being published in the National Era over on the right-hand side. Harriet Beecher Stowe had a contract with Gamaliel Bailey from the National Era, which was one of the largest weekly newspapers of the day. Now, the National Era expected 3 to 4 installment stories, but they ended up, from Harriet Beecher Stowe, 49 installments from June of 1851 to April of 1852. Because she was a woman, because it was such a large story, because it had already been published, Harriet Beecher Stowe actually had difficulty seeking out a book publisher. You can also imagine, because of the topic on hand for Uncle Tom's Cabin, there are certainly some parts of the United States that definitely would not want to publish her book. However, it was extremely popular. That's why there was 49 installments. In the reader's roll, they said, keep it coming. They wanted more. This book was extremely popular in its time. It made Harriet Beecher Stowe an early international megastar. In the first week, there were 10,000 books sold. That was quite an accomplishment. But by the end of that year, she had sold 300,000. She was outsold in the United States only by the Bible, and it was an even bigger sensation in Great Britain. It also created a frenzy of other creations. There were plays and songs, card games, puzzles, poems, and print edition after edition created just from this one story. In fact, there were over 20 songs created in its publishing date of 1852 alone. Looking on later, when films first came out, and this is some of the first era of film, the one of first of many of Uncle Tom's Cabins was done in 1902. The most expensive silent film ever created was about Uncle Tom's Cabin, and that was created in 1927. Now, of course, if you have one point of view being published, you're going to have the other point of view being published as well. So you're going to see a flurry of anti-Uncle Tom novels. And there were at least 27 published between the years 1852 and 1860. Now, their whole role was to show happy slaves, or we would call them servants, and they are with benevolent parental masters. They enjoy working for their masters. Their masters are very kind to them. Some of them would be called Aunt Phyllis's Cabin or Southern Life as It Is by Mary Henderson Eastman. And you also have Uncle Robin in his cabin in Virginia and Tom Without One in Boston by J.W. Page. And remember, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe was published in 1852. These two books were published within a year after that. Now, the African American response was quite mixed on the novel. Many, of course, praised the anti-slavery message. However, others had criticized the colonization idea and of the racist stereotypes. Some also see Tom's character as being overly docile. Others read him as symbolically triumphant and a very powerful character. And so we have this very mixed response where we have this woman who's distinctly uncomfortable with an idea of racial equality. Now, on the fact of the idea of that mixed response, we do have Martin Cross, that is a poem in Frederick Douglass's paper on March 25th, 1853, in which he responds to Uncle Tom's Cabin. "Talk not to me of colonization, for I'm a free man of this native land, not of Africa's burning sun and sand. We hereby make our proclamation that we're opposed to emigration. This is the land which gave us birth, our fathers' graves, our freedom's earth." However, even with the mixed reaction, this is certainly a book that mattered at its time. It had the power to shape the story of African American experiences in the minds of the white readers and viewers who might not have been educated on what slavery really meant in different parts of the United States. Its ultimate points would probably show the saintliness that we had of little Ava and the faithfulness of Uncle Tom to her, but we also see with the opposing side that stereotyping and the minstrelsy that you would get from very early African Americans in novels. Now, Uncle Tom becomes the stereotype Uncle Tom because of revisions of the text, and a lot later in our minstrel shows that we see coming out and later in the 19th century in the United States, they would actually call them Tom shows. So what's the bottom line? Well, you had a lot of literary, social, and cultural contexts that people didn't publish about before this point in time. So you have positively embroiled and embedded a whole web of concerns. People actually started talking about this topic. The story is also told and retold through shifting contexts. First of all, in its original newspaper text, and then people wanted to go out and buy the book. You would see the 1850s responses not only in plays and songs, but the anti-Uncle Tom's Cabin books. You also can take a look at continued responses today, even from the early 20th century when you start seeing silent films being made, to critics in the 20th century, all the way up to the 21st century, and what the responses are to Uncle Tom's Cabin today. Thank you so much for stopping by to learn a little bit more about Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. If you'd like me to actually go through the chapters in the book, talk about characters, do a little bit of summary or analysis, please leave a comment down below if you'd like to learn more about the book. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Take care.